Let's start with these election results from Tuesday. It was not a good night for Republicans. Democrats had wins really across the board when you look at the top office down to some of the lower level offices across the country. When you look at the results, is it time for any sort of course correction as you go into the midterms next year?
I wouldn't put too much weight on it. They were very well-known elections, especially the mayor of New York. But New York, I mean, you look at who's left New York, you look at who's left Northern Virginia, you look at some of these other states like New Jersey, who has exited New Jersey. You're going to leave a lot more blue there. And these have always been blue states, at least in the past several decades, as far as voting presidentially. So I wouldn't put too much weight on them, but I think the underlying lesson is to make sure that you've got good candidates and that you have the right message and that you work hard. And I think there were some flaws there, but the underlying issue for the people that went to the polls is affordability. And I think Republicans have the best solution for that. Now we need to talk about it more and have the best messengers.
Well, I mean, you look at some of the results, you're right, New Jersey, typically a blue state, New York City, obviously blue. Virginia, though, is interesting. I mean, and I'm from Virginia. They got a Republican governor. And you look at the General Assembly races that occurred. Democrats picked up a lot of seats. They flipped Republican seats. They made some gains on rural voters, younger voters. What can you learn? What can you draw from that maybe voters are saying as you go into the midterms next year?
Well, back to having the right message. And I think if you talk about something that was really significant a couple of years ago, is not maybe what's on top of voters' mind this year. So you have to talk about those issues. That's affordability. And I think they were talking about a little bit of an older message. And let's go back to the actual person that's running, the candidate. Glenn Youngkin in 2021 was an exceptional candidate. I think he did a great job, and he did a great job as governor. He's doing a great job right now. So I think you have to have that. For somebody that's as blue-ish a state like Virginia, you've got to have an exceptional messenger.
Well, and you had pickups on some of these lower-level seats, too, in places like Georgia. You had some in North Carolina. The
utility commissioners there,
yeah,
and you've got judges in Pennsylvania. I think you have to make sure that, what's the momentum at the top of the ticket, and make sure you have great candidates at every level.
Are you worried, though, about those cost increases? We are seeing inflation not lower like the president did run on. So how much of a concern is that when that's, economy is always number one issue for voters?
Affordability, pocketbook issues are always the number one issue. That and personal security. So I think we have to take care of those. The president was very clear yesterday. When you look at the upcoming really expensive meal for a lot of people, and that's Thanksgiving, that's going to be 25% less according to Walmart. And so prices in some areas are coming down. Some areas they're a little sticky, but the policies of the president and the policies of the Republican platform are what is going to lower prices for people.
Well, one of the concerns, too, is two dynamics here. One is, how do those election results impact what's going on here with this shutdown? Some would say maybe the Democrats don't feel like they need to reach a deal because they say the American people have spoken on this. What do you draw from this? Because the president seemed to say this week that Republicans are being blamed for this shutdown.
That's actually the darker side of the shutdown, is that Democrats held this closed, and they, we actually have messaging coming to us that we're hearing from Democrats that say this was kept closed by Chuck Schumer in order to juice turnout in New Jersey, in Virginia. And I think that's really bad to play politics with American lives.
But the president said this week that it seemed to imply in his Truth Social post that Republicans are being blamed for this shutdown. So is there something that needs to change with either the messaging, or do Republicans need to sit down and reach a deal with Democrats?
If you actually poll a different question, you say, should you keep the government closed down in order to do this? It's overwhelmingly believing that it's Democrats that are keeping it closed in order to negotiate, where the people want the government open in order to negotiate. And that's our position. Let's have a negotiation. We're going to negotiate either way. Let's do it while the government is opening and functioning and providing the services to the people that they paid their taxes for.
Well, one of the ways the president thinks we should go about doing that is through getting rid of the filibuster. I'm going to ask you about that right after the break. Stay with us, Capitol Tonight. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Capitol Tonight in our D.C. studio this evening. I'm Ruben Jones. Want to continue our conversation now with Republican Senator Ted Budd. We talked about the concerns he has with federal Helene aid for Tropical Storm Helene recovery in western North Carolina. But first, we asked him about President Donald Trump's recent calls to eliminate the filibuster in the Senate. One of the things we have heard from the president, and he has ramped up the pressure here in the past few days, is that he believes the Senate should get rid of the filibuster. For our viewers that aren't familiar with that, basically that means you need 60 votes in the Senate to get a lot of legislation through, which means you need Democratic support. You've heard what the president has said. You know what happens here in the Senate. Do you support getting rid of the filibuster?
Look, he did want to open it, or he wants the government to open. I get that. He wants to do it through breaking the filibuster. And this kind of goes back to when the first Trump won in 2017 when we were dealing with health care. And I was supportive of it. But I was also in the House at that point, and I'd been in office about 3 months. The purpose of the filibuster is to protect against radical ideas and bad ideas. Let's put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say that the Democrats were in power, opposite of what we have right now. What they would do, and they've promised to do this, is break the filibuster, add 5, maybe 9 more members to the Supreme Court where we wouldn't get a favorable judgment in decades. They would add Puerto Rico and D.C. right here as a state. That's 4 more very far left Democrat senators. And it's an ad infinitum long list of things that they would do, which are irreversible. So we want to make the country better, but the Democrats would be extremely radical, and I'm very hesitant to break the filibuster over something that would give us short-term gains and very long-term damage.
So what I'm hearing is you do not support getting rid of the filibuster?
Not at this point. I mean, it's like an in case of emergency break glass sort of idea. I understand. I'm sympathetic with what the president wants for the American people. And I'm respectful of that. But we've got to have a lot better plan. Why don't we just open the government and let the Democrats come to the table? Well, I think that's the best option.
You just pointed this out, but you used to support in 2018, before you're in the Senate, where you're in the House side, you supported getting rid of the filibuster. Then you supported not getting rid of it. Talk to me about what you've learned since being in here in the Senate in terms of your thought process on this, because Senator Tillis told me yesterday he's an absolutely no, he does not support getting rid of the filibuster.
End of the day, we just don't have the votes even to break it, right? I'm very sympathetic with what the president wants. I want this to be fixed. I want to get his agenda through. I ran on his agenda. I supported his agenda. But again, at the end of the day, we just don't have the votes for it.
Okay. Let me pivot to something else here. The Department of Homeland Security announced this week or last week that it was going to approve $155 million for Western North Carolina.
Right.
That's for rebuilding Tropical Storm Helene. You were very supportive of this. I know you've been pressing for this. What's your reaction? But then also, we have heard consistently from leaders in Western NC that the federal money is not flowing fast enough. So what are you hearing from DHS on all this?
So I've placed holds on DHS nominees until we get that money to Western North Carolina. That does not include an announcement for the money. That means it needs to show up in their bank accounts. So we're a little Jerry Maguire here. Show us the money on this, and then we'll release one hold. I've got 3 holds, but I'll release one if that money shows up.
I mean, that's a big statement coming from a Republican towards the Trump administration. Who is the point?
And I would differentiate between President Trump. His first place of visiting when sworn into office was Western North Carolina. He's a builder. He's a rebuilder in this case. He is all in for Western North Carolina, and I think he's done a great job there. But I just want to make sure that FEMA, which has a history of being a bureaucratic nightmare, especially in emergencies, is actually getting the money to where it needs in these counties.
Well, and FEMA is going through a review process right now. There's a council to look at what might need to change with that. When you look at the recovery, though, I mean, the report in September was that only around 10% of the money, the federal money that the state has requested, has actually been granted to go to Western NC. Who is the point person from FEMA or from DHS on Helene recovery?
Look, there's, I'm one of them. I'm working
for the
administration. Look, you got the head of DHS is Secretary Noem. And then you have a team that she's put together. Some of these people have come in, not done such a great job. They've been changed out.
Are you satisfied with Secretary Noem's job performance on this?
Well, until we get Western North Carolina back up and running, I'm not satisfied with anything. My focus is on Western North Carolina, but remember, we've got the rest of the state to look after. You've got events down in Brunswick County that were very concerning. We have prior to Helene, there was some damage down there that is still in arrears. So we're pushing for all of the state, but right now the main focus is Western North Carolina.
And Michael Whatley was appointed the point person, seemed to be appointed the point person by President Trump when he was down in Western North Carolina earlier this year. Have you had any communication with him about Helene?
I talk with him all the time. He is doing a great job behind the scenes, making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. He is from Western North Carolina. He's actually from Boone, Watauga County, born there, and he knows how government functions. He is so skilled, and he's been a good advisor to me for what lever to pull and what to move next. So I'm grateful for his help.
Senator Ted Budd, appreciate your time.
Always
as
good to see you. Thank
Hit
you.
a lot of topics. Thank you.
We did.